War is not won by numbers alone. Ask any soldier who's ever stood in the mud, heart pounding, watching the horizon fill with the enemy. Numbers can't measure what a man feels when he decides not today. Across history, there have been moments, small, almost forgotten moments, where a handful of people looked at something enormous and terrifying and simply refused to move. This isn't just a list of battles. These are stories of real human beings. Fathers, sons, young men who had names, who had fears, choosing to stand when every rational voice said, "Run." 480 BC, the pass that became a legend. Imagine you already know you're going to die. Not maybe, not possibly. You know. That's where King Leonidas stood in 480 BC. He'd seen the reports. Xerxes wasn't bringing an army, he was bringing a nation. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers pouring out of Persia like a flood, and Leonidas brought 300 men. 300. But here's what people miss about Thermopylae. Leonidas wasn't delusional, he wasn't prideful, he was deliberate. The pass at Thermopylae was narrow, barely wide enough for a few men to stand shoulder to shoulder. In that choke point, numbers meant nothing. Persian soldiers couldn't swarm. They had to come one at a time, straight into Spartan spears. For 2 days, they held. Warriors from the most powerful empire on earth, stopped by 300 men who simply refused to give ground. On the third day, a local man, a Greek, one of their own, showed the Persians a hidden path around the mountains. When word reached Leonidas that the enemy was behind them, he didn't panic. He sent most of the allied soldiers away, saved their lives. And then he turned to his Spartans. What was said in that moment, we'll never truly know. But those men stayed, every single one. They didn't charge because they thought they'd win. They charged because they understood that sometimes the point isn't to survive. Sometimes the point is to make sure others do. Greece rallied, the Persian advance slowed, and the story of those 300 men never died. January 22nd, 1879. The longest night earlier that same day, just miles away, a British force of over 1,300 men had been nearly wiped out by a Zulu army at Isandlwana. The survivors who came riding back to Rorke's Drift brought a terrifying message. They're coming. Thousands of them. Run. Most of the men at Rorke's Drift were not elite soldiers. They were supply troops, hospital workers, men recovering from illness in the sick ward. Lieutenant John Chard was an engineer. He built bridges for a living. He'd never led men into battle. But in that moment, he made a decision. We don't run, we build. In desperate hours, 150 men stacked mealie bags, overturned wagons, and threw up whatever they could find into makeshift walls. They looked at a mission station and turned it into a fortress with their bare hands. When roughly 4,000 Zulu warriors emerged from the hills at dusk, the men inside those walls knew the math. They fought anyway. What followed was one of the longest nights in British military history. Wave after wave crashed into those barricades. Men fired until their rifles burned hot. Some fought hand-to-hand in the dark. Inside the hospital, patients who could barely stand grabbed weapons and defended room by room, retreating through holes they hacked through the walls with axes. There was a private named Henry Hook, described as something of a troublemaker before that night. That night, he carried wounded men on his back through a burning building while Zulu warriors tried to break the doors in. By dawn, the attack had stopped. They had held. 11 Victoria Crosses were awarded that day, the most ever given for a single engagement in British history. But perhaps more telling is this. Many of the men who fought there that night were never fully able to talk about it afterward. Some things are just too heavy for words. February 1945. When dying was the mission. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi wrote a letter to his wife before the battle began. He told her not to expect him home. He knew what was coming. The American naval force gathering offshore was one of the largest ever assembled. He had 21,000 men on a volcanic island, 5 miles long. No air support, no naval backup. No possibility of reinforcement. Tokyo had essentially written them off. So Kuribayashi made a choice that was as cold as it was courageous. If they were going to die, they were going to make the Americans pay for every inch. He built underground, miles of tunnels carved into the volcanic rock, connected bunkers, hidden artillery positions, firing holes that could be sealed between shots. He told his men, "Do not banzai charge. Do not waste your lives in one dramatic moment. Make them come to you. Make it slow. Make it costly." When the Marines landed on February 19th, they expected the beach to explode with resistance immediately. It was silent. For 20 minutes, they walked ashore almost unopposed. Then the island opened up. What followed was 36 days that Marine veterans said they could never explain to anyone who wasn't there. Tunnels that went nowhere and everywhere. An enemy you could hear but not see. The smell of sulfur mixing with smoke. Boys from Iowa and Georgia and California dying in volcanic ash on the other side of the world. Of the 21,000 Japanese defenders, only around 216 survived. They hadn't won. They had never expected to win. But they had made the cost so high that American military planners began reconsidering the invasion of mainland Japan entirely. Those men, those ordinary men following extraordinary orders, may have, in their deaths, changed the entire final chapter of the war. What the lost battles left behind, we like to think of war in terms of victory and defeat. But history keeps showing us something more complicated. Sometimes the men who lose the battle are the ones who change everything after it. The 300 at Thermopylae bought Greece its future. The 150 at Rorke's Drift proved that ordinary men can do extraordinary things when there's simply nowhere left to run. And the soldiers of Iwo Jima, on both sides, showed that courage and tragedy can exist in the same breath. They were not superhuman. They were afraid, exhausted, far from home. And they fought anyway. That's not a strategy.